Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav, and it's the end of the season, thank fuck for that. Not the way I wanted to end the season, not the way that we wanted to go into doing the end of season pod. I think in the past we've done like end of season awards and really got into it, and this is probably the first time in many years where the season's ended on such a damp squib with nothing to play for, which has really given us no motivation to do these podcasts. But after the event, we're here to collect our thoughts on the season. We don't have a plan for this. I said to the lads before we started, I haven't made any plan. I haven't thrown any questions out to the Twitter users. We're just going to see where it goes. I think it'll probably end up being a bit of a rant about the way things have gone this season. So joining me, if you're still here, by the way, is Chris. Hey, mate.
You didn't mention that the fact that we've waited until now because you've just getting over your heavy weekend. We didn't mention that bit.
There was that, yeah. I just ignored Sunland for the weekend and went to rugby instead in London. And I don't even like rugby, but I do like beer. So, that was good. And also with us is Martin. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. We waited all season to get Chris on after a win, and we're still waiting, aren't we? So that'll have to be next season.
I actually forgot about that. It's been that long. I forgot all about it.
We have to work out when you were last on for a win. It must have been before Christmas, because we haven't won that many games since Christmas.
I think I worked it out. It was one of those two games, the West Brom or the Leeds game, I reckon. So early December.
I was going to say, how many managers have we had since then?
We've already started off on a good one, yeah, but like you can tell just by the way we're talking about this, the way we feel, the way we sound. It's not the way we all wanted the season to end. Sunderland were terrible going towards the end of the season. I think other than Rotherham, possibly the worst team in the league. Relegation form in the second half of the season. Lost more home games than any other team in the Championship. I think we only lost one less, someone can correct us if I'm wrong, yeah, but only one less than what the team who got relegated from the Championship lost when we were relegated in 2017-18 or whatever it was. I can remember doing podcasts with you sort of around the time Mowbray left, around the time Beal even came in, and we were quite level-headed about things, where things might end up. We were kind of looking at it and thinking, well, actually, at that point, the season is probably about where we expect it to be, and the fall-off that we had until the point where Beal was sacked, and then the club took a very conscious decision to basically just write the season off. I mean, it just got worse and worse and worse, and that feeling permeated through everything, every performance, every team that Mike Dodds selected between then and the end of the season, every press conference, the pervading attitude of the fan base even. Everybody had written the season off, and it's led us to this point where we're now looking at the summer thinking we need a major boost. I'll come to you first, Martin, on this. I mean, the second half of the season, as we've went over numerous times on this podcast, it's been a disaster. But the way the season ended on 3 defeats as well, it like sums everything up, doesn't it? When you see the stadium basically empty for a lap of appreciation, people are so fed up. And rightly so, I think, given just how bad it's got.
It's just petered out ever since Beal left and Dodds came in, hasn't it? And I think it was already heading to something when Beal was there. Obviously, there was a whole host of things that weren't quite right there. But when Beal left, if I'm correct, I think I am. I think we were only 4 points off the playoffs, and we still had, it wasn't looking that promising, but we still had enough games to, a good run of form would have took us back up there. And I think we had a tough run of fixtures, didn't we? Which kind of influenced our feeling about whether we could make the playoffs or not. But as I say, we just wrote it off. I think even when Speakman did the podcast with the club and he said we're going to plod on till the end of the season, and that's exactly what we did. We plodded on to the end of the season, and in reality, if the season had been 3 or 4 games longer, we'd have gone down, because we have been in absolute free fall. We got 9 points from the last 13 games with Dodds in charge. 9 points from 13 games. That's worse than relegation form.
Does that make him our worst ever manager? Or he must be close to the numbers Howard Wilkinson got. I
think Howard Wilkinson has a slightly worse record. And I think Kevin Ball's spells in charge had a slightly worse win rate or points per game. But they were both managing in the top flight. But like Dodds has just turned a half-decent team into absolute relegation candidates, and we would have been, like say, 3 or 4 games more, we would have been sucked into that because, with Sheffield Wednesday winning, they only finished 3 points behind us. And look how far ahead we were of them when we beat them at Hillsborough earlier in the season. Like, the free fall that we've been in is being criminal, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and like Martin says, Chris, I think had the season gone on a few more games, and I know it's ifs and buts and maybes, but you look at the trajectory we were on, the teams below us picking up points. It's a good thing the season ended when it did, really, because so close to the bottom. I remember saying, I think it was during the run of 6 that we lost 6 on the bounce under Dodds right near the start. Oh, it actually included a couple of losses under Beal, didn't it? We'd lost 6 on the bounce. Yeah. And I remember at the time coming on here and saying, bloody hell, if we aren't careful, like we could get dragged into the mire. We never did. We never actually did at any point get dragged into the scrap. But we were that close. We weren't a million miles off getting dragged into a relegation fight. And if we had have done that, I don't think we'd have had the stomach for it. You look at like Chef Wed, who managed to stay up. Look at the battle and the fight in their team. Right at the end of the season, if we'd have been sort of looking over our shoulders with 2 or 3 games to go, I don't think we would have had the stomach for it.
No, and look, I mean, yeah, I talked a lot about the Wednesday fans that I talk to on a weekly basis, and it's funny that in the lead up, they were coming up to us going, "Oh, you've got to do us a favour," and I went, honestly, don't worry about it. I went, don't worry about it at all. I went, you'll do us over. I went, you'll get 3 points against us, no problem. And they were going, oh, no, you're a half decent team. I went, honestly, look at it a bit closer because we're really not. And I just went, put money on that. You'll get 3 points and you'll stay up.
That would have been the safest bet of the day.
And the ridiculous thing is, like, for most of this season, I've been talking to them, loads on the school run and my lads' footy team and all this sort of stuff. And I've been taking the mick out of them for most of the season. And we've finished 3 points above them. Like, I've been laughing at them. Like how crap they were at the start of the season. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And like the fella went in there and completely. But the thing is, this is the thing that you're talking about, managerial changes, and that the way you worded it there, Gav. That kind of after Beal left, it was like, all right, look, let's just scrap it. Let's scrap this season, and that's how it felt to everyone. And it obviously felt like that to the players. Because you could tell they were like, it was like flip flops on, wasn't it? It was like, right, season's finished in February.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going up, we're not going down. Right, where we're going on holiday, lads. It was kind of down tools. And you look at Sheffield Wednesday, and you could look through history at countless other examples of managers going in and having an immediate effect. And that's a perfect example there that. If we'd gotten someone in, like Martin says, it wasn't too far off when we made the changes in terms of how many points we were away. And we'd only lost 2. We'd lost the Birmingham and Huddersfield game, I think it was.
Huddersfield, yeah.
Yeah, and before that, I mean, because I was looking at kind of just, and I'll come on to Dodds ball just in a second, but, at that point, we could have gotten someone in to give us a spark. Yeah. And like,
yeah.
So why not? Why not like make that appointment where it gives everyone a lift, it gives the players a lift, it gives us a lift? Because again, I was looking at Dodds taking over and the players just seemingly, going on to the beach. I mean, in Dodds' 13 games, we scored 7 goals. In the last 5 games under Beal, we scored 8 goals. So in less than half the games, we scored the goals that we scored in total throughout all of Mike Dodds' 13 games. And it just say whether it was mentality of the players, because it was interesting listening to Luke O'Nien after the last game saying we're being coached really well and this is on us. And that's kind of the message he was getting across. He was saying it's not what we're doing on the coaching, on the coaching side. We're just not responding to it.
Dodds also said that, didn't he? When he kind of put the blame onto the players and said they need to, basically they're not getting the fair portion of the blame.
Yeah.
I mean,
the whole appointment in terms of just saying Dodds to the end of the season, it was communication from the club to the players and to the fans that basically they were giving up on this season. And it showed.
Well, it was.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this kind of brings the discussion into the whole head coach thing as well and what that role actually is, because they might have been coached really well. Like during the week, the coaching might have been great. We don't know. We weren't there to see it. And, people were speaking highly of Beal's coaching abilities even when he was here, weren't they? They were saying Beal's a good coach, world-class coach, or whatever it was. But that is a group of players that wasn't being managed well. They weren't being set up to manage a game well. And you talk about the goal scoring. Like, we scored, 2 goals in the last 7 games. One of them was when we were 4-0 or 5-0 down against Blackburn. And one was from a corner. Like, that isn't a team that's been well managed. I don't care what's going on during the week. In terms of setting up a football team to take on another team, that team is not well managed. And, there's all sorts of things to pull out, isn't there? There's bloody professional pride. There was very little professional pride on display in those games. You can say, the club wrote it off and the players kind of took the cues from that. Where was the pride? Like, we saw it against Leeds. In that away game against Leeds, I think that was the only game we truly saw that real desire and pride to go out and try to get results. Obviously, we got the win at West Brom as well, but apart from that, there was nothing. And to me, it's really concerning going into next season on the back of a run like this, because we've seen it before, haven't we? Where you finish the season badly and you go, it's all right, we'll write that off. Next season's new start, it's all fresh. And it's very easy to get sucked back into that poor run of form. 1 or 2 bad results, confidence goes. So to me, it's more concerning than just finishing the season off poorly, because it could have further repercussions.
Just you're talking about that, well, I don't know whether you said the word, Martin, but the model or the head coach type.
I haven't yet.
Okay, well, I've said it. I've been the first to say it. If anyone's playing kind of Sunland bingo out there, I've said the model word. But we've said it before that, in theory, it's this system where you've got this head coach and the style stays the same. The players know what they're doing. They know what their jobs are. The head coach comes in and implements the club's philosophy, which he's told to do. That's his job. Then when one head coach leaves, certainly I was under the impression that, with Christian Speakman being there, he's got this list in his drawer, basically, that he's keeping tabs on. He's watching coaches all around the world. And he basically goes, right, who's on this list? Who would work best in this situation right now? And he goes out and gets them. Now, okay, it's not always a perfect world in terms of that person being available or contract problems or compensation or whatever the issue might be. But still, when Mowbray leaves and you make a change, they went straight out, right? Beal's at the top of our list. Fair enough. See how he does. For whatever reason, they saw to make the change, whether it was pressures from outside the club or whether it was going wrong on the training ground or in the club. Who knows? We might never know. They make the change again, and then it should be, as far as I'm concerned, right, who's at the top of my list now? You go and get him. But they just say, Dodds until the end of the season. But then what you have to do, for the club's sake, is communicate the decision. Whether it was, we wanted to change direction, or we wanted to do this, or we're waiting for a right person to become available. And the problem is, without that communication, players have down tools. And I think the fans showed with their feet after the final whistle against Sheffield Wednesday that the fans have kind of told them so as well.
It's a really important point, Chris, in terms of that continuity. Because like the other element to it, which we've seen over this season, right, is you kind of go, well, end of last season, start this season, Tony Mowbray is implementing the style of football and the formation and all that sort of stuff that the club wants. That's the vision for us on the playing field who are playing like that.
Yeah. Which,
if it is, great. I've said it before, that was some of the best football that I've seen us play for forever. And to me, if you've got that list of managers, that head coach, who's going to come in and replace him, there's a continuation of that playing style philosophy, because that comes from higher up, right? The difference that we've seen when Beal came in, he's had a reputation of not playing with wingers. Now, we've got however many wide players in the squad. Our best player is a wide player. And you immediately saw us go 10 yards narrow either side. And, Jack Clark was more productive within that. But on the other side, we weren't getting that width. And we were looking at a completely different style of play, a narrower style of play, a more direct style of play, a bit more defensive. And then Dodds comes in and we start playing 5 at the back. We start being ultra defensive. We're not going forward, not scoring goals. And to me, that completely contradicts what the club said we're trying to do in terms of that continuity. Like, to me, what's the difference now between a head coach coming in and a manager coming in, apart from maybe having more of a say in transfers? Because we're not seeing any difference between a new manager coming in and a head coach coming in. And like that lack of continuity and lack of consistency in playing style speaks volumes for me, because it says that we actually haven't got, for all we say we have, we actually haven't got any set defined way of playing. It's down to the person who's head coach.
Yeah.
And, you can argue whether that's right or wrong, but if it's right, then we need to be choosing the head coach on a different selection criteria than the ones that have come in and have been chosen on.
Yeah, and you bang on. And the worrying thing about that is because they've come out and publicly stated they wanted and they've said in the past, like you said, they wanted the club to play in this certain way, and that runs throughout the club. The managerial appointment so far doesn't seem to back that up. The managerial appointments just seem odd considering what they're telling us they want to do. The two don't match up. Now, it almost seems like this managerial appointment needs to be a statement that they're snapping back in. Like they should be saying, look, we've made a couple of mistakes. We veered from where we wanted to be and we kind of got too far away from the path. This managerial appointment pulls us right back in. This is where we want to be. And it's a clear statement of we're kind of back to this was our original plan and that's the way forward.
But then it begs the question, doesn't it, whether that's the right model? There you go, 2, ding. Whether that's the right model or not. Because, surely any manager who's going to... first of all, you're going to limit the selection pool that you're choosing from by appointing a head coach and not manager. A lot of managers out there will want to be manager rather than head coach. So by appointing a head coach, you're limiting who you're selecting from. But then if a head coach comes in and he sees, well, actually, this group of players, I reckon I can get better results by playing 5 at the back or by being more direct. He's sticking to a philosophy implemented by somebody who's never played pro football before, who's so where does the blame ultimately lie? Because if that's how we're actually operating, the person who's head coach can't be blamed for that much of it, because if you're being limited in how you can do things and what you can do, you talk about this signing of players and who was signing younger players and all that sort of stuff. That model of signing, of the head coach or manager being one of a number of people who are selecting players and signing players, that's pretty much every club in the world. Yeah. People go, we should appoint a manager, let him sign all the players. It just doesn't happen in football.
Well, Alex Neil said that, didn't he? Alex Neil said that.
That's exactly right. So that doesn't happen. So that's something that we can kind of push off the table. Concentrate on signing younger players and not signing players over the age of 26, 27, whatever. That is what we're doing. But the manager not being able to sign his own players, 100%, that's nothing. That's football. It's not 1985 anymore. That's how football works. So that bit's kind of a bit of a red herring really in the whole conversation in my mind. It's more about, that philosophy that's, whether it's Christian Speaking, whether it's Kira Louis Dreyfus, whether it's a combination of them, putting in place, say, we want this style of football, whether it's, it is them who are putting that in. So where does the manager's responsibility lie to deliver it?
It's interesting going into the psychology of a football fan. Because let's say we've just finished 15th, right? Well, we have just finished 15th. Amazingly, I don't know how.
16th? 16th, I think.
Am I giving us a place? Well, all right then. Let's say in the world of fantasy, we finished 15th, just to make us feel a little bit better.
Level 15th. Level 15th.
Well, there you go. It makes me feel a bit better. If we where we finished this season, talking about the psychology, if we'd done that by playing the style of football we played last season under Mowbray, but we didn't get the results, would the stadium have been full after the game, even though, that kind of we'd finished where we'd finished, we'd gone on this bad run, but even though the style of football, we were kind of entertaining, but the results weren't going our way, would people have been more appreciative of that type of season than hardly scoring a goal, but finishing where we finished? Of course we would.
All right.
And when you talk about the club trying to be more pragmatic, and it's interesting that actually, Martin, you touched on the Beal and Dodds, and I mentioned Dodds ball as well, if anyone's still dabbing their Sunland bingo cards, that, we seem to be going more pragmatic with Beal and Dodds, where they went slightly more, when I say slightly more defensive, I mean, Dodds at times been playing a flat back 5, but anyway, I'll get into that in a bit, I'm sure, but you look at kind of that style of football, but in terms of them being more pragmatic, we still only drew 2 at home all season. And when we're talking about, you were talking about our home record earlier on, I mean, there was only 8 clubs in the league who won more than us. So we won a hell of a lot, but we lost more than pretty much everyone as well. But the point is, we only drew twice. Now, there's those points where in past seasons, we would have maybe gone behind and had to fight to get back in the game. And we we managed to salvage a point at home. And those points build up. Like you say, if you only lose, I don't know, we lost 10 or 11 or something. If you only lose 4 or 5 in a season at home, then that would have been 6 more points, which propels you right up the table. So you're talking about the club maybe trying to be more pragmatic and getting these managers in who were not as expressive as Mowbray's team were, but we still weren't grinding out those results.
But Chris, I think that's the point, right? I actually don't think the club went to get a more pragmatic manager. They went to get the best head coach they could find, the best person on the training field to coach the players and develop the players. I actually don't think with Beal there was that much of a thought in terms of what's he going to do on Saturday. It was more about what's he going to do Monday to Friday with the players and how's he going to develop them and how's he going to coach them. Yeah. And I think that's the massive bit that's being missed.
And that was true with Dodds as well. They went for a coach, someone who coached them during the week, exactly, rather than manage them on the Saturday.
Precisely. And I think that's where we've missed out, because Mowbray was a manager. I know he had the title of head coach, and I don't know what his coaching ability was like, but he was a manager. Alex Neil was a manager. Lee Johnson was a manager. They would lead the dressing room, would manage the players, be that figurehead. And I think that's where Beal has fallen short or found it difficult in his career when he's moved from assistant to being the main man. And, all the feedback from Rangers, all the things that you read from Rangers suggested that you kind of struggled being that one person rather than the confidant of the players, the first team coach out in the training field. And that's where we need to get this appointment right. And it's going to be really interesting to see how we actually approach this next appointment. Because to me, if we go for somebody who's just a great coach, we're going to end up in the same position in 6 months' time.
And I know Gav's getting really bored of listening to us, but just on that quickly, like, because all the signs are, and you listen to a lot of people talk out in and outside the club about Mike Dodds the coach rather than Mike Dodds the head coach. I actually think it would be a slight shame if those talents left the club just because he maybe got put into the wrong job. He hasn't got the ability to do that job, but he's got the ability to do the midweek, day-to-day, this is how we want you to play on the coaching pitch. Because, like I said, it was interesting what Luke O'Nien said. He said they're doing a fantastic job on the training pitch, but they're not able to get the players to do that. Now, if you get a coach to enforce and make sure the players do that job on a Saturday, but you've got the coaches to do the good job during the week, that's surely the best mix, isn't it?
Yeah, I've had a great time listening to you two, by the way. For me, I think what we've seen the evidence of with the Beal appointment and then with Dodds coming in, it's been said a lot down the years, like there's a certain type of character works at Sunland. We need a figurehead.
I agree.
We need somebody who can manage expectations in the media, who's good with the media, who on the sidelines has a presence, because that's always worked for Sunland. And we've got away from that with these recent appointments. Mowbray had that, but Mowbray wasn't a coach. The murmurings coming out of the club when he got sacked was that they weren't happy that he basically didn't do any of the coaching on the pitch. They wanted somebody who was technically good, who could take the training sessions. But we've seen in the last couple of appointments, I guess we've got to include Dodds as an appointment at this stage, we've seen it doesn't work, because it doesn't. Beal and Dodds are awful in the media, absolutely terrible. And it permeates through everything. I've used that word a few times now, but it does. When Mike Dodds is coming out before games and he's throwing the players under the bus, that's an inexperienced manager who doesn't know how to manage things. I was just thinking while you two were talking there about what we should have done instead. And it was mooted at the time. People joked about it. Neil Warnock's left Aberdeen, but somebody like that would have been a better choice. I'm not saying we should have went for Warnock, but he wouldn't have been a terrible appointment. But just somebody who could have seen the season out, but just been the face of the club and manage the media, manage the fan expectations, and then let Mike Dodds do the coaching that he's apparently so good at. Whoever comes in next, they've got to be somebody with a bit of presence. And if that means pairing them with a really good technical coach, like this Maric guy that they've been linked with, I don't know if he's even in the running. All we hear is that he's such a good coach, he's a young guy and all that, but he's not a manager, is he? He's never been a manager of a club, never mind one as big as Sunderland. But why not bring in an elite coach, but pair them with somebody who can really manage the club from the front? And I suppose it begs the question, like that's basically what we had with Mowbray, didn't we? We had Tony Mowbray doing all the talking, and then Mark Venus doing the coaching and Mike Dodds doing the coaching and whatever. And we got away from that. But whatever we do next, I hear these names like Will Still, and I'm just not inspired by it because I just think it's more of the same. And I'm really not confident that they're going to go and get somebody who's got the tools at the disposal that we need. I honestly think we are really going down a bad path if we don't bring in somebody who can manage from the front. And they don't have to call them a manager, but just somebody who really is the figurehead of the football club. If we get away from that, I can't see how it works.
When you were talking there, Gav, about an experienced figurehead and a young up-and-coming coach, I could just picture Howard Wilkinson and Steve Cottrell with his notebook on the sidelines of the Stadium of Light, and I thought...
it doesn't always work.
Maybe it's not a guaranteed recipe for success. But I think having experience... Like, we've got to get some experience somewhere. And I think especially when we've got such a young team, we need an experienced manager. We need somebody who's been there, done it, who's not going to get swayed one way or the other, who's going to remain steadfast and give the players confidence and take the weight off the players' shoulders. And like that's important for most clubs. And I think, a lot of the time when a younger coach can work is when you've got that experience in the dressing room and the players are kind of managing themselves to some extent as well. But I just think if we get more inexperience in as head coach with a young side, and moving the conversation on ever so slightly, but, it's been rumoured Dak's leaving, Corey Evans is leaving. And I know Dak's not going to be a miss at all for anything, but Evans will be a miss off the field, I think. Luke O'Nien was talking about his influence and his experience and all that sort of stuff. So you're looking at the dressing room probably next season that's got, hundreds of games taken out of it, with Evans and Dak leaving and whoever else goes, which to me makes it even more imperative that whoever's head coach or manager has some experience to fall back on. And this is all well and good, but then you talk about Danny Roll at Chef Wed and the great job he's done, and he's 31 and never managed in England, so you never know which way it's going to work.
What works for Chef Wed might not necessarily work for Sun, and that's the thing, isn't it?
Well, that's right. And you and I have spoken before, and I've said before and here, like, to me, whoever's the manager has to manage the whole club, and that includes the fans. The manager has to manage the whole thing, and we haven't had a man like Mowbray was that, but Beal and Dodds weren't that person. And if that's our prototype for the manager, we're going to be in trouble next season.
I've got a feeling they might go down the foreign route, but just listening to you two talk there, and I've said it on pods in the past as well, that I think managing Sunderland is very different to, and I might be sounding big-headed here, I might be sounding biased because I'm a Sunderland fan, but I genuinely think because of geography, because of what the area's like, you need a certain character to manage Sunderland Football Club. Like, I think the appointment of Beal is a perfect example. Like, he didn't command respect on day one, and it was almost like it would never work because he didn't have that respect on day one. And you need a character who just commands it. As soon as he walks in through the door, Sunderland fans go, "Oh, he's a fella," and like he's a proper bloke. And I'm not kind of going all kind of manly here and kind of alpha male, but but it just needs to have that respect, have that kind of gravitas around him, where Sunderland fans go, "Bloody hell, right? Okay, we've got him. I want to follow him." And if they don't have that, it just tends to fall apart. And I've said before that. You look in the past of managers who've just naturally been successful, and it's like your Dennis Smiths, your Mick McCarthy's, your Peter Reeds, your Roy Keanes, those fellas who seem to call a spade, and Sunderland fans respect that. I just think we've got there's an element of toughness that I think somewhat like a manager's got to have as Sunderland manager, and if they don't have that on day one, the results just have to go right.
There's only two other clubs, I reckon, in the Championship that are similar to us in that respect, where you look at them and you go, I know the sort of manager who's going to work there. And to me, it's Leeds and Millwall. You know the sort of manager that's going to work at both clubs. And like if you look at Jesse March going into Leeds, never going to work. Never going to work. The coach that went into Millwall halfway through this season, former Chelsea youth team coach, he was like you could tell he wasn't a Millwall manager when you listen to him speak and how he went about things. And I think where us and those two are the examples of where there's a sort of almost an identikit manager that works. They've got to be almost bigger than the club. And that's one of the reasons with Heckingbottom when he was linked, and that's kind of gone quiet with him now. But he had a spell at Leeds, and he was kind of cowed by managing Leeds. It was too big for him. And yes, that's 5 or 6 years ago, but the fact that he failed there gives me no confidence at all about him coming into Sunderland and doing the job.
Yeah, and I genuinely think with managers can be very good managers, but managers' styles suit certain clubs.
Well, look at Moyes.
Yeah, when you look at managers, it's not like, oh, they've done very well there. They're just a fantastic manager. They fit that club and they fit certain clubs. I think Roy Keane's a really good example where at Sunderland, where we're all fired up, we've got this kind of fanatical fan base. He kind of felt it and he got into it and he tapped into it. He went to Ipswich, completely different feeling about the club. Family club, it's all kind of based on, it's a bit more kind of, it's not quite as fanatical. And it didn't work. And he kind of said it. He went, as soon as he walked through the door at Ipswich, he went, this has got a different feeling. And it's that sort of thing where I think managers know what type of manager they are and they suit certain clubs.
But it's that sort of person who will be fueled by that expectancy of the crowd and the size of the club and the stature of the club and not be intimidated by it. And you can see, Beal, Dodds, like Lee Johnson. I think Lee Johnson struggled with the size of the club. And these managers get overawed a bit by it, not in a starstruck sense, but just by the sheer volume and magnitude of everything that's going on around it. And, Keane's a great example. We've had, going back to like Dennis Smith, he was he was motivated by that, and he loved that challenge, and he stood up to it. And, Peter Reid was exactly the same. He was fueled by that. And, look at Peter Reid after he left us, like he went to Leeds, didn't he? But then he was Coventry and Plymouth, and he never found it again. He never found that two-way thing that brought the best out of him and brings the best out of us. And I must admit, I just don't think the club get that. I just don't think the club understand that dynamic because we're not the same as every other club.
No,
and I think that they haven't realised that yet.
That is a worry coming into this managerial appointment. As I said before, I used to have a lot of confidence in the decisions they made, but I'm not confident with this one. I'm hoping there's a name we just haven't heard that's going to blow us out the water here and be like, oh, bloody hell, what a great appointment he's going to be. Like, I mean, you're right what you said before. We have to get an immediate feeling that this person is the right person. And there's not many managers out there right now available who I can think of. Like, the obvious one is obviously Steve Cooper, but I cannot see it. Why is he going to come to the 16th place team in the Championship where he gets very little say? I honestly think money talks. If we wanted to pay him enough money, he would come to Sunderland. I don't think it's a massive leap. I don't think it's a giant leap. And it's not like his CV is way above Sunderland. He's managing Nottingham Forest and Swansea. But I just think we're very limited in the way we're looking. We aren't getting this information firsthand, but the feeling everybody has is that they're going to go for another coach. There's a reason Will Still's being linked with the job. And I don't think it's all just bluster. There's no smoke without fire. I'm sure he's one they've looked at. He's available now. But I look at him and I don't see how that works at Sunderland. I think this is like we've said it repeatedly, this appointment is huge. It's absolutely massive. It's defining for this ownership and this structure, I think. Because they've just gotten this last year so badly wrong that they have to get this spot on. And like we could sit here for another hour or two and talk about where we need to go in terms of direction with transfers and all the rest of it. But it's moot. The managerial appointment is the starting point. We have to get that bang on. And you just said something, Martin, which I've been thinking for a little while. I genuinely don't think they get it in terms of what we need. Well, I think they see the blueprint for Sunderland. Great academy, big stadium, big fan base, lots of untapped potential there. And they see that if you get a really good coach in who, in the mould of a McKenna, a Maresca, or a Corberan, these coaches who've came into the sort of the top championship teams and done well, if you get that right with this football club, it could work. But I can't get out of my head that there's this need for experience and leadership in a real figurehead. And how many of those coaches are going to drop into the championship where you've got like a really good coach who's also a really good leader of men and sort of a face of the football club? It's a giant appointment. Like I say, there's nobody obvious really sort of comes off the tip of my tongue other than Steve Cooper, and I think we're probably pissing in the wind with that. I don't think we've got a chance of getting him.
Yeah. Well, you've both said that you don't think the club get it, and I'm not completely disagreeing because this season suggests that. I mean, the whole Beal debacle was ridiculous.
That you've got to reflect on that because everybody
of course,
was kind of down on that, weren't they?
But I'll go back to the kind of controversial at the time, third in the league, dumping Lee Johnson, which I think probably it was kind of a 50-50 split in the fan base. But then bringing in Alex Neil, and actually I do think Alex Neil was of that character that we've been talking about, where he brought everyone together. And then you've got to then give them credit when Alex Neil jumped ship, that they brought a galvanising figurehead in Tony Mowbray, who was that kind of uncle who arm round the shoulder, there's a Werther's original type of fella where, everyone got behind him. So they have gone down that route, to be fair.
So if they jumped ahead too quickly then? Because I guess at some point, a coach would be the appointment you make, but because you're right, Alex Neil, when we appointed him, he was a former Premier League manager dropping into League One who'd gotten out of the Championship. So you kind of looked at that and you went, I can see that working because he's gotten teams promoted before. And then Mowbray we wanted someone to settle it. And he wasn't a really popular appointment, but it made sense for what we needed. If we jumped ahead too far, because they got rid of Mowbray, and the impression we got was that Kirill didn't really like Tony Mowbray. He didn't like the fact he didn't take training. He wanted a coach in. He brought a coach in with a great coaching CV who it felt like was set up to fail, really, with Michael Beal. I think that's where the feeling of not really understanding it comes in. What I would say, though, is as learning experiences go as young owner, this has been massive. Like, if he didn't get it then he should get it now because, you've seen how badly it's gone.
But managerial appointments, by their nature, are usually because you want to change, or you want to change something about what your last appointment was, just by their nature. And you look at Alex Neil, and he was a tough fella, big character, knew what he wanted, wouldn't take any shit from the club. If the club said something that he thought wasn't the best way forward, he'd tell them in no uncertain terms that what he thought. And I don't think they're like that. But if you look, he took over from Lee Johnson, who was the opposite to Alex Neil. And then Alex Neil left, and they thought, we didn't like that so much. He was a bit, hang on. And they brought a softer character in Tony Mowbray, who was very happy to take the job and probably quite grateful after kind of leaving Blackburn and stepping into a big club like Sunland, come back to where he lived and all this sort of stuff. So there was a different character again. And then because of exactly what you said, the reaction then, right, we're going to let go of Tony Mowbray because he gives the players too much freedom on the pitch. And that's been stifling us in terms of taking that next step up. We need someone who really coached this side. And now we're going to get the opposite to Tony Mowbray, and we're going to get a really good coach because that's what we need. And then that didn't work. And they seem to appoint Mike Dodds just to put him in place because now I get the feeling now they don't know what direction to take. They've tried that manager who give them a bit of freedom. They didn't really like it. They tried a head coach. Didn't quite work. Now they're probably thinking, well, what direction do we take now? Which character do we get? And they've had a whole range of characters in a short space of time. You're talking, 3 years now? And they've had a whole range of characters and kind of job types. So I'm not sure they know where to go next.
I think with Beal and with Dodds and with the vast majority of the names that have been linked to take over now, they're all people who I think the club can control.
Yeah.
Like you look at Alex Neil would fight against them. Yeah. You talk about Tony Mowbray giving them too much freedom off the pitch, on the pitch, whatever. I think the reason Mowbray left was because he stood up to them with transfers and he demanded more experience.
In the end.
And that got to the point where... exactly. Yeah. So it got to that point where that was the thing. And, the fact that they didn't let Beal bring in an assistant and they brought him in by himself, that to me was like, right, you can come in, we'll give you your coaching staff, you come in, we're watching everything you do, watching everything you say, we've got your phone tapped. Like, it's all about, to me, it's all about control.
Well, obviously they didn't.
And, like, it's burner.
I'm slow on the update today, and you just got that last second.
But and that again, that concern, I actually think with when Beal left and they put Dodds in, that was more about buying them some time and breathing space than it was anything else. I think if they put another full-time person in with the intention of giving them a 2.5-year contract, appointed after a couple of weeks of recruitment, they didn't want to put themselves in that position, because if they got that wrong, that's catastrophically bad. Yeah. So I think that they actually put Dodds in just to buy them some time and take the pressure off. But the consequence of that is now we're all going, they've had 3 or 4 bloody months to sort this out. They could have interviewed every manager in Europe by now. So, like, they've actually, while they might have bought themselves some time, they've actually increased the expectation to some extent, because they've had this time to get this right. And, there could well be, and I'm sure there are conversations that are going on with different managers who haven't been reported, haven't made the press, all that sort of stuff. But again, if you look at the profile of the people who have been linked to the job, and some of those links will be accurate and some of them won't, but they're all very much of that head coach, young, inexperienced sort of head coach, leader person. And again, it's just concerning for me.
Well, just on that timing, I mean, I have to admit that I'm now of the thinking that I don't really mind. I'm not kind of, clicking on refresh every day, looking for them to make an appointment this second. In an ideal world, the appointment would be made today. But I'm not saying I'm desperate for them to do that. I'm desperate for them, and Gav made a good statement earlier on about how important it is. They need to get the right person. Now, I don't care whether this rolls into, as long as it doesn't have too much impact on what players are signing contracts and moving forward with the club. I mean, they've got to assess that. They've got to weigh that up and make sure it doesn't impact any of that. But it's about getting the right person. And whether that runs into June, whether that, goes into, it makes no difference to me. As long as they get the right person and we go into next season and start getting results. Because the proof will be in the pudding when we start next season. But look, in an ideal world, absolutely, they make the appointment today, they make the appointment tomorrow. But I'd rather them take as much time as they want and get it right than do another Mike Beal.
But there's no guarantee of getting it right. That's the thing, isn't it? Everyone who we appoint is going to be a gamble to some extent. Yeah. Now, I agree with you. There was people kicking off because by 9:05 on Monday the new manager hadn't been announced, and I don't get that. I think you can give yourself some time. Any manager worth the salt who's going to be worth getting will have options, and they'll be waiting to see which clubs make a change at the end of the season as well. Yeah. So we could have been having conversations, and we've criticised the club before of, you've just gone straight for the unemployed person. Don't have to pay any compensation, don't have to wait for them. Get somebody out of work who will leap at the job. And I think we saw that with Michael Beal. Michael Beal probably didn't take time to go, is this the right club at the right time for me at this point in my career? Because if he thought about it, he probably would have gone, no. Because there was so many things didn't quite fit. But out of work, offered a decent contract, offered a decent paycheck, you can start work tomorrow, jumped at it, get back into the game. And I think, we've actually created a situation for ourselves where we can actually pick somebody who's not desperate to get back in, because they get back in next month or the month after or 3 or 4 months' time now, because they're not going to lose any managerial experience, not going to lose any involvement. But I think for us, we need somebody who is there, at the very, very latest on the first day of pre-season training. Yeah. We can't let this go in the middle of July, end of July, without a manager or head coach. We need to have that, on that first day of pre-season training, the new manager's got to be in. Ideally, would have been in for a week or two. I'm not desperate to see somebody appointed this week, but I think we absolutely need to have that cut-off point where we go, we are making the decision here. And if that person doesn't want it, that person's getting it. Yeah. Because we can't afford to get into pre-season, get into the friendlies, and not have a manager in place.
Yeah, I mean, the pre-season's got to be their target. Don't get us wrong. But I think the kind of overarching point I was making is that I'm not desperate for them to make an appointment this week, because it makes no difference. No. The players, whether it's in, let's say, the next 3 weeks, it makes no difference because the players are away anyway. So the players are off on holiday, they're enjoying themselves with their families. So it doesn't make a difference whether we appoint a manager today or in 3 weeks. Like you said, the important thing is when the players turn up on the first day, they've got that voice. The voice is already there. There's no uncertainty. That's what they've got to be targeting. But like I said, I'm not in any rush. I'm not the only thing, like I said, that can impact that is what decisions have to be made between now and the players coming reporting back. Like, what players have contracts shoved in front of them at the moment and they're considering them? What players are talking to their agents about leaving? There's all those things going on.
Or joining. That's
joining.
The other thing.
Yeah,
players coming
exactly.
in.
Yeah.
Out of contract players who are weighing up different clubs and different offers. Like, the sooner we can get some assurances about next season, the easier it's going to be to get those players in.
If you've got offers coming in for the likes of, there's already rumours about Ballard, Clark. Now, if they've got an offer in front of them, you would imagine if they're even considering staying, one of their first questions to the club is, well, who's going to be in charge next season? And if the club just shrug their shoulders, they're just going to be going, oh wait, I'm off then. Basically, it's a decision made for them.
Yeah, it's all very deliberate, isn't it? And you look at the length of time we've taken to do it. Obviously, you look now, leagues are finishing up. Managers are not just, we're talking about players going off on the holidays. Managers are going off on the holidays who may be weighing up their options. And I'm guessing the reason we've waited this long is because there's probably a bigger pool to pick from. Because you're going to have managers who, we talk about where we've always went for the cheap option, but let's say we wanted to buy someone out of their contract who's employed. You're much more likely to get them in the off season when they've finished up their work for the campaign and they're away on the holidays thinking about what they're going to do over the summer. Then you probably are during the season. And I'm sure we've been taught, we know these things happen. There'll have been conversations between the club and people who are in work. And it's all very deliberate, I guess. But as we've said, it has to be done by pre-season starting because God knows. I think it makes them look incompetent if they've waited this long and they still can't get somebody in for the first day of training. And they know that. I think they know that. But, we talk about the benefits of waiting. Let's just say they go for Will still. If we went for him in January, it would have cost 3, 4, 5 million to buy out of his deal. Now he's a free agent. Maybe they knew that was going to happen at some point. I think the rumour was that the release clause expired over the summer that he had with Reims. So he wouldn't have cost anywhere near as much to get out of his deal. Perhaps that was in their thinking. But, I mean, these are the things you've got to kind of consider that we don't always consider as fans, is that it's been very deliberate. The thing that annoyed me was that I had no problem with them waiting until the end of the season if it meant getting the appointment right. It's the fact that we didn't put anything competent in place to stop the gap. Like, Mike Dodds wasn't a competent stopgap for that period of time. That's why when people might laugh, listen to when I said Neil Warnock, honestly, I would have preferred it. Somebody who was happy just to come in for a few months, who would have at least given us something to sort of cheer about, I think. Warnock's just the name on my lips, and he's nothing. Look, he's nothing like what they want to appoint, but I think he would have been happy to come in for a few months. And there would have been other managers out there who would have been quite happy for a paycheck for 3 or 4 months, manage the season out, leave at the end of the season and go, to the next manager, he has the squad. I think we would have been in a better place. Like, if I can't imagine we would have appointed somebody on a short-term deal who had done a worse job than Mike Dodds did. And that's the thing that annoys me. I'm not bothered about them waiting as long as they get it right. It's just, I can't shake this feeling like they did such a horrible job of seeing the season out. And it gives us no hope for what they're going to do going forward.
I will just offer a counter-argument there, though, because I think, Mike Dodds' 3 games in charge before Beal took over were good on the whole. We played well. He showed us something different. We tactically looked good. We played pretty well. And when Beal left, I wasn't dead against Dodds being put in full time. It was more of a situation I was thinking, like, let's see what you can do. See if you can do that with the 3 games that he had. Let's see if you can do more of that with the last 12 or 15 games that we had. And we all know how it turned out, and he was disastrous. But I think it's a hindsight, isn't it? Like, in hindsight, yes, he'd make a different decision. But at the time, I think that most people were kind of relatively content with that. Club buy themselves a bit of time, give Dodds a chance. Dodds could have turned out to be a superstar. And we might be sitting here now going, oh, we need to appoint Mike Dodds. He's just got us into the playoffs. It's the way it worked out. It's what transpired rather than that decision to me. And you can never know how it's going to transpire. But unfortunately, Mike Dodds went back to being the Mike Dodds that took over after Lee Johnson rather than Mike Dodds that took over after Tony Mowbray.
Yeah, well, just I mean, look, just a devil's advocate on Dodds, and I don't disagree with anything you said, and I've already kind of, put the boot in a little bit. But to be fair to him, when he did take over after Beal, he took over a squad who lost Mowbray, who was popular, then had him for a few games and listened to him and seemed to respond to him. Then had Beal, who was a completely different character as well. And then when Beal got the sack, they'd basically been at a club who had 3 different voices by what? Beal came in December. So you're talking 3 different voices between August and December. And then when Beal left in February, the players at that point just went, oh, God, just like a bit like us, end this season now. And then Dodds had to go in and then motivate them. And don't get us wrong, I think he got it completely wrong in a lot of places. But I think you've got to say, well, he took over a squad whose heads were just gone at that point.
And I think that's the whole point, isn't it? With that knowledge, and everybody could see that was happening. You had a number of different voices in the dressing room. The confidence was dipping and going down by the week. And that's where you need an experienced manager to come in. So I think that's the lack of decision there. It wasn't necessarily Dodds per se, because as I say, I think most people were relatively content with Dodds coming in at that time. But really, when you analyse that scenario, the one thing that we needed in the dressing room then was experience, just to see us through at the end of the season.
Not just that, but I do think Beal was dealt a bad hand in January, where they didn't strengthen where we clearly needed strengthening. We were finding goals hard to come by from all over the pitch, relying on Clark, and they didn't sort that out in January, and those problems just went on, and in fact they got worse.
Yeah. We've talked mostly about managers. There's loads we haven't covered off, so I think we're going to have to get our heads together in a few days and talk about the other stuff. And we haven't really talked anything about players, about the sort of off the pitch crap that's gone on this season. So we will get back together, the 3 of us, over the coming days, and we'll do a part 2. But yeah, we've banged on a lot about managers, so I'll let you 2 lads go off and enjoy the rest of your days. Cheers, Chris.
No worries.
Cheers, Martin.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers to the listeners. Thanks for joining us. Like I say, we're going to be bobbing in and out through the summer. There's going to be loads to talk about, I'm sure. Hopefully, we'll have a manager to talk about at some point in the next few weeks too, so there'll be that. Cheers, lads. Cheers, everyone, and we'll catch you later.